Hello, I'm Krista McAllister, and welcome to Cerius Leadership. Whether you're growing your business or growing your career, quite possibly both, thank you for listening. Today, I get to dive into global product management and AI SaaS to explore the cutting edge strategies really shaping today's business landscape with Sean Everett. Sean, I'm so excited you're joining me today. I've got a number of questions that I'm sure myself and many others have for you, and looking forward to
hmm
our discussion.
Great. Well, thanks for having me today, Kristen. And I know it's the end of the year, so happy holidays. And
Uh,
this might hit the market after the holidays, so we'll be early for 2025, maybe.
it absolutely will. And I'm always curious especially when we talk about AI and some of the topics that
hmm
we'll go through today, is how evergreen it is versus
Yep.
how dated it is, and do we have to re-record it in 6 months or a year? We'll see. I think some of the strategies that we'll talk through, and in fact, let me kind of jump into that, is I one of the things that really intrigued me the most of getting to know you is how much of your work is engaging with private equity groups and strategic acquirers as part of the M&A and due diligence process.
hmm
What are you being brought in to review or analyze?
Yeah, the last 3 years have been pretty wild, but one of the primary growth levers that investors and business managers and operators have used over decades now, maybe even a century, is the acquisition and integration of other cash flowing businesses. And so, as you look at major Fortune 1000 strategic acquirers, or just the business of private equity, which is we're going to acquire a number of companies, we're going to
Mhm.
integrate them together, create more value from that platform rather than a point product, and then resell that platform company to perhaps another private equity firm or a larger company, and in some cases, even take it public. So, what happens is that you're actually taking a very complicated process and you're just squashing it down into like a 5 year hold period. And in some cases, the best of the best down to like 2 or 3 years, which it's sort of like a startup on steroids because you have to be not only really, really good, but you have to move really fast. And then to your point on AI, the game has completely changed. And so the speed at which product development can happen, the speed of competition, both from your competitors, but also now your customers can be competitors, and we can get into that if you want, means that table stakes are no longer table stakes. Like emerging tech is now table stakes just to compete in the market that we exist in. And so your question about evergreen, this stuff is changing so rapidly. I've been messing around with internet products for the better part of 30 years since I was a young kid. And I've never seen, and I've built a lot of emerging tech products. And so you sort of see this like slow burn, and especially over the last decade with social media and SaaS companies. But now it's instead of like year-long product development cycles, they're collapsing down into quarters and sometimes months. And the innovation that's happening now, especially with the convergence of all of these new innovative technologies together at the same time, when we already have a global interconnected market, means that this stuff is like basically we ain't seen nothing yet. So it's going to be a wild ride for all of us.
And when you talk about those cycles, I think software development and agile development cycles, are we talking the tech and intangible or service, or is this also physical products that are being created in those types of timeframes?
Yeah, what's interesting, software is moving a lot faster. And so if you look at the software world, you will see the iteration speed. And then what you can do is you can take that structure and you can apply it to physical world because robotics is moving. Hardware is not quite as fast, but we're seeing that happen. And I've actually done diligence on AI. Know how deep I can describe this, but let's call it AI for hardware manufacturing. And that's about as deep as I'll go there. And so there is capital being allocated into private equity firms, investments, product development. And now that large language models, that breakthrough of the attention paper has sort of taken over through transformers. that aspect is being also applied to physical product development. So in the far future, I mean, we're getting more into sci-fi here, but
Mhm.
really not. It's going to start coming in quickly. Is you could imagine sitting at your chat GPT prompt and saying, "Hey, make me a cup of coffee," and your home robot could make it. Or in the industrial world, you could say, "Hey, I need to change the manufacturing spec on this thing," which then gets delivered to a robotic arm. And in plain language, you've reprogrammed that robotic arm to manipulate blocks instead of balls as it's moving things throughout the assembly line process. So that stuff is here today. And so all you have to do is imagine like iterative steps as this thing starts to expand. And then you just start linking up all of these workflows and industries together. And you could have a global supply chain manufacturing operation that very rapidly over the next 5 to 10 years is far more automated than it is today.
You mentioned one of the keywords are linking up because we saw that we've seen evolutions of this. We saw it with
Mhm.
software. It was we no longer need an IT department. It was so easy that everyone could put a credit card down, get software on demand, and be off
Mhm.
and running. And now we're seeing that come back around to all right, we've got a 15 software marketing stack. We've got a 20 software operation stack. We've got to
Mhm.
consolidate that. So with product innovation or product creation, if it's that easy, how do you link it and almost rationalize it?
Mhm. Yeah, the linking is one side. The other side that I pick up from that is like, how do you maintain competitiveness in a commoditized market where software businesses or any business is just as easy as creating content for social media? So the number of influencers that you see across social media, imagine that's the
Mhm.
number of software businesses. So as these things have expanded, I think what's happened is a lot of these companies have carved out a silo in a very specific niche. And as I've done, and we've done customer development conversations with the buyer persona, the admin persona, and the end user persona, the same message continues to ring clear, which is too many products, too many tabs, too many clicks, too complex, takes too much time. And so you can essentially, with this new unlocked AI technology, you can say, well, now I want to cut across all of these vertical solutions, like these 15 MarTech platforms. I want
Mhm.
all of these things connected onto an end-to-end workflow such that I don't have to pull data from all these pieces. I don't have to go like into this tab and then click these buttons and then into this tab, click these buttons, download a report, send it to an analyst, have them link all the data together, analyze the data, write a report, send that back to the executive team. They then have a conversation about it, try to figure out what's going on, send more questions back, come back, get the answer, make a decision, then start product development or changes in the org. And that takes a whole nother year. So you can see, like, if you have a way to just go into a chatbot and say, here's my question, and I'm going to break all this Gen
Mhm.
AI future stuff down. There's
Yeah.
only three pieces. It's a question, it's an answer, and it's a task. The question and the answer you can right now mess around with in Chat GPT. You can like put a query for anything. What's the sports score for yada yada, or how do I bake a cake, or what's the competitive analysis for XYZ marketplace? But after that, you also link it, and you start to see this in ChatGPT. It's like function calling tools. One of their big tools is search. Search is a tool that when you're getting a response from that artificial intelligence, it calls out to Google, it does a search or Perplexity, and it brings back an answer, and then it spits it out into its response. So imagine now, instead of Google, you have all 15 of those marketing software companies integrated into ChatGPT. So when you request something from them, it will not only give you the answer, but you could also say, go do this for me. Like, I need to change this user's admin permissions to this one. I need to send an email to all the customers in my database that have this attribute. Like, they're located in California, for instance, and they recently bought soap. And so you could say, go hit them with a 10% off offer this weekend because I don't know, there was some thunderstorm and it's like it flooded a little bit. And so we need to clean our clothes a little bit more. So you could see how all of a sudden that then becomes much quicker than sending it out to your email team and your data
Hmm.
analyst team. So this is inside baseball, and I'm giving away some value here for free, but imagine the new distribution channel is you're integrating into that new app store in ChatGPT with all of these third-party SaaS application tools, such that you can now have distribution across 2 billion people using the internet. And it's connected to all the software tools that we've spent the last 20 years building out in a manual basis. And then things start to get really interesting. So then the question becomes, what do you do then? How do you win in a world that looks like that?
I'm curious as to, as we say, gosh, that sounds sci-fi, that sounds so far out there. I remember being in retail not too long ago thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be great that the app for all my retailers would be connected to the weather app, and when the
Hmm.
forecast was rain, they got a task that said, go put umbrellas at the front registers, and we got
Hmm.
ahead of it. That
Hmm.
wasn't that long ago. So the speed comes up quickly. My question is, as you're looking at private equity portfolio companies, you're looking at potential acquisitions and you're looking at the
Hmm.
products, whether we invest in that company and the
Hmm.
products that they have is usually some unknowns. Is it still going to be relevant 6 months from now? Any number of questions. What is that lens that you're using to say this
Hmm.
is a good investment, or what we're seeing and what we think is accurate, or is your expertise laying somewhere else?
Yeah. Yeah, the diligence process, there's a few different expertise categories. So one would be like legal due diligence. Another one would be quality of earnings, which would be your financial folks. The world I play in is technology growth and strategy, which crosses over into commercial. So we'll take a look at the technology, and a lot of times the investors will say, is it scalable? Is it just spaghetti and really rough under the hood, or is it architected really well? Is the infrastructure efficient? Are they spending too much money on hosting? We'll look at the financial statements as well, especially related to the R&D organization and all the spend on third-party
Hmm.
software, on compute, on storage. If they have AI, we'll also look at their models, we'll look at their proprietary data, and we'll make an assessment of how defensible is their moat, and ultimately we'll come up and we'll write a report that gives our view on like where are the risks, where are the strengths, where are the opportunities, and for the risks and the opportunities, what would it cost to address those things on what time horizon, near term, short term, midterm. And so AI is starting to come up in a lot of diligences. And what I'm seeing in enterprise SaaS is some folks are further ahead than others. Some
Hmm.
folks have spent years building out their data science team, collecting all of their data into a data lake, and they're surfacing that now in their existing product, but also in net new product to drive cross sell and upsell. And so, and some they haven't started. They just have like Gen AI on the roadmap. And so you could say maybe they're a little bit further behind. But as we start to move into this next hold period from 25 to 2030, that next 5 year lens, especially as interest rates have come down and the M&A markets are starting to open back up, I think there is going to be a huge race coming here. And so the question that's going to be asked isn't, there's a good quote, came from, well, let's just say a principal at a private equity firm. It's like, we went through diligence, right? We got commercial diligence right. We got technology diligence right. But guess what? The company didn't perform as well as we thought because we got the product wrong. And that's such a key point. Like, is your product fit for purpose for what the market needs and the market's evolution of their needs? So that is where a lot of the magic and the secret sauce comes in is like, do you have the right product market messaging fit to address not just the rear view mirror, but the next 5 years when all of this stuff is up for grabs and the foundation everyone has built on is changing. Even the SDLC process, the software development lifecycle process, is pretty standard. It's been disrupted now that you add in like researchers, PhDs, we're building models, we're fine-tuning models, we're adding in RAG, we're doing prompt injection, we're looking at like evaluations and accuracy scores. So it's become, there's some overlap, but it's a different discipline to run a hybrid standard SaaS plus
Mhm.
Gen AI product in the modern world.
Something you hit just because we're seeing a lot of that, the M&A checklist, they've now added how are they leveraging it? Is there AI involved in the product? And you're saying
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily even need to be the product. It could be their internal operations, how they're developing the next product, how they're staying ahead of the trends, or how they're selling their product and staying ahead of that. So, what are some ways that how companies can better use analytics to refine their product offerings or refine their service offering?
Hmm. Yeah, one of the interesting things is, to your point, is this an internal facing tool meant to drive EBITDA growth and
Yeah.
efficiency? Is it an external facing tool meant to drive ARR? They're two very different things. And the internal piece, if you have people analytics, even the external with the analytics piece, is you can detect the pathways people take through your business and through your product. Those are the major workflows that work. Essentially, I get a request in, I do some work, and there's a handoff. And then they do some work, and then there's a handoff again. So when we started talking about this AI stuff, which is here's a question, here's an answer, and here's a task, that 1, 2, 3 process, what's actually required is you have to start breaking down almost like a business analyst or a business process re-engineer person, break down into these very fine-tuned tasks, encode that into software, and then have that software run those tasks for you. So instead of you like manually doing the task, now all of a sudden you're pushing a button. So maybe your task moved from I'm doing the task to I'm documenting my task such that I can then push a button to run that task. And then here's the interesting piece. We're starting to see some emerging compensation incentive design mechanics to accelerate this process internally. And it's starting to be like profit sharing plans. So the more EBITDA, the more profit that my company creates because we've all automated ourselves gets shared back into my paycheck. So if we made $10 million extra in
Mhm.
profit, now I'm going to take 1 to 2 million of that dollars and I'm going to spread it to all the people internally. And now all of a sudden that's your bonus for the year. And then keep going.
That's such a mind shift change. I've got to double
Hmm.
click on that one from
Hmm.
10 years ago, even 5 years ago, going to company operationally, and it was pulling teeth to take that knowledge transfer from
Hmm.
what's in your head, put it onto a piece of paper in one way or another, because that knowledge someone had was considered job security.
Hmm. Yep.
Now you're saying we're shifting to the other end of the spectrum of we're motivating individuals, there's incentives
Hmm.
to do so. And it's just a different thought process
Hmm.
to say, how do I replace what, not just knowledge, how do I replace some of me and what I was doing? Because that's going to drive efficiencies and drive my profit sharing.
Hmm.
Now, what else can I do? Are we going to see that going into now? What do we do? That's internal. What do we do to create a better product for our customer? How do we
Yeah.
shift to that mindset?
Yeah, and I think we're in a different world now. We saw this post-COVID with the hiring boom and then the fast
Hmm.
layoff. And so we saw
Oh,
that
yeah.
slope. I mean, I would love to hear your perspective on this too, because you had a front row seat to the whole thing. But I think that this idea, and in some cases it still works, that you come out of college or school and you work 30, 40 years for the same company. We're just not in that world anymore. And so, what it means to compete in this new world is if you're not building the tool, then the folks who are building the tool, and that could be as simple as I'm encoding my skills into software, into an algorithm, into numbers that if you don't do that, then there's a sense of obsolescence. It's like here's a good paradigm shift. Long time ago, the business world never had email. And the businesses who first started adopting email like took a ratchet up and they were operating and executing much faster. And so you as a person inside that company had a choice. You could choose to continue to like write memos and have it sent inter office communication, or you could choose an email. And at first it feels weird because you're not used to it. But then you start getting a response immediately and you go back and forth. You're like, oh, damn, I actually got this done 10 times faster, this answer I needed than I did before. And I think it's this a similar sort of thing because if you encode all your stuff and you document it out and you train your own personal AI model on that, maybe you take your AI model with you. And now your AI model can work for three companies instead of just one, in which case now you can diversify your own revenue
Mhm.
as an individual instead of being siloed to one. And that's the essence of business. No business on the planet says, you know what, we're going to rely on one customer. And if they go, oh, well, it's part of the diligence process. Like, do you have 1,000 customers? So, as an individual, if you start thinking of yourself as the asset, you are the asset, right? You are a business of one. And if you can take all of your skill set, your capabilities, and encode that, then you have additional lifespan. Because here's the thing, right? Like, I'm getting older. My fingers hurt from 30 years typing on a keyboard and mice. My eyes, I wear blue Blocker glasses because I
Mhm.
spend 15 hours a day staring at a screen, like small mobile ones, large desktop monitors. So at some point, I'm just not going to be able to do this stuff. And so for me to say, I need to start, I feel this, I need to start encoding my information now, all of the workflows that I do on behalf of my customers, my clients, and everything, get it into a tool such that I can just push a button and it can go through 7 different steps. I mean, I just did one today, went through a whole process, and I started encoding all of that stuff. And it takes a lot less time than you would think, but to me, I think it's like it's I'm reducing my risk of something bad happening to me or
Mhm.
just my ability to continue compete in the marketplace. And then maybe I can help others do the same. I don't know.
And and where's your value? Was your value in doing those tasks, or was your value in creating the output, which then creates the outcomes from those tasks that you're doing? Now let's go
Yeah.
create more outcomes.
hmm Yeah, because it's a good point. You got to work backwards from like, where's the value creation? And everything ultimately is some kind of task. I mean, we don't just sit there and like magic value is created. So we all have to do something. The question is, are you doing the right thing? And are those things compounding in the right way? So it's not that you want to document every single thing that you do. It's like you first want to collapse it into what are the things that I do the most that have the highest value and start there. That will then start to create some compounding effect. And then you can always expand out over time. But if you get that one really tight, then you can start to see some good value from that.
And
So we see other orgs doing this.
you've mentioned that what you're evaluating when you're working with investment companies, and really the question at the end of the day is how do we take this and go make more? Does
hmm
it have a ramp to it? Does it have a launching
hmm
point? Does it have that capability? And you said you're evaluating, was it the technology, the growth, and the strategy of it? Um,
hmm
I can imagine the application of that at the leadership and the board level of any company being able to, whether I'm looking to, I want to create value, I want to create legacy, um, taking that same lens of technology growth strategy.
Yep.
How would board or leadership be able to harness some of this thought process or some of these tools to then
Yep.
think like an investor?
Yeah. Um, I was fortunate enough to start my career advising the boards of like the Fortune 10. And these are very complex, large companies. And I worked on behalf of the compensation committee. So it was like, what do we pay our executives, our boards, all the employees? What incentives are they linked up to? And then what's the bonus or long-term incentive based on their achievement of those metrics? So ROA, ROE, ROIC, revenue growth, total shareholder return. And it's up to the executive and the board to do whatever they need to do inside the organization to move those metrics into a positive territory or an improved area. And a lot of times what you find is the board will get these big board materials every quarter, like
Yes.
a month out, and the binders can be this thick. And it's like a lot of these board members, they're the CEOs of other companies, or they're retired and have done this before. And it's like, "Gee, this is a full-time job." And most of the board members are making 60 to 150K plus some equity, which is very small compared to like what their executive pay was. So it's like, do I have the time? But I also have a legal risk and fiduciary responsibility for this company. So I'm, as a board member, I'm quote, low paid. I have huge legal and reputational risk. I don't have a lot of time, and I'm meant to make very impactful decisions and understand the entirety of the business when I spend a week, a quarter. Like that's crazy. So to me, this is perfect because all AI is you're just condensing gigantic amount of information down into something small. So if you could, I mean, this is a thought experiment, but if you could take all this information, you could encode it into a model, right? And then you could just ask some questions like, tell me where are the biggest risks in the company? Like, what are the strategies that the company is employing? Okay, do a quick competitive analysis for me and let me understand, like, is this actually differentiated? Will this create a competitive moat? What's the risk profile from a compliance and a legal perspective, but also from a brand perspective? And then you could ask such things like, am I exposed to any of the information based on
Mhm.
here? Where do I need to focus? What's my largest growth lever? What's my largest expense reduction lever? What's going to drive TSR? And then, like, personal to me, like what makes me look good in the press, like give me quick news reports with the positive sentiment, the negative sentiment, tell me what's going on social. So that tool alone, I mean, somebody could build a business off of this for sure. And I'm sure like the Russell 3000, you'd have 3,000 customers right there. A board of 10 people, that's 30,000 people paying $100 a month. I mean, we just made a business. So
To do
congratulations.
that. I see that from a leadership perspective, taking every strategic plan, every
Hmm.
binder that we've ever made coming out of those wonderful leadership meetings,
Hmm.
every one of our marketing, taking all those materials, putting them in from the last 3 years and saying, where did we miss? Where were the
Hmm.
market? Where does this, here's our strengths and our opportunities. Where do they align with consumer behavior, consumer wants and
Hmm.
needs, and have it start to draw on what we don't know. We don't necessarily need to do our research from scratch, but take,
Hmm.
here's what we have, now fill in the gaps. What are
For
five
sure.
potential products or what are five potential customer problems that need to be solved that our product or service could solve?
Hmm. Yep.
That's what I'm hearing from you is I
Hmm.
no longer have to think in that way. I just have to then spit in the information and it's going to help me do that research and identify those little gaps.
Yeah. Yep. I believe so. I mean, we're at that place right now where you can literally just upload a ton of documents, put them in a data lake, we'll do retrieval on it, and it'll start to pull up the information. I mean, I'm building some of these products right now, actually, for a Fortune 500 brand. So it's happening at the deep within the organization.
Mhm.
And so I think what'll happen is as it's just an accelerant all the way across. So the cycle times are just going faster and faster and faster. The business problems never change. It's just we now have tools to do a lot of this work faster.
Yeah.
That's it at the end of the day.
So taking it from theory to the tactical, I'm a business owner, regardless of size of company. I'm trying to either figure out how do I find more markets or more customer
Hmm.
profiles that have a need for my product, Or of the one I'm selling to, what are going to be the future needs, or what are the market shifts that I'm just not staying on top of as I'm trying to manage my product portfolio? Because it used to be
Hmm.
just quick service restaurant. You got to just come out with new product and, a Snowball Express and a new cup, and you're going to increase sales. That's all you had to
Yeah.
do every three
Yeah.
months. It's new product innovation and you're going to sell it. Not
Hmm.
necessarily the case anymore. As you
Hmm.
mentioned, 2 seconds after you come out with it, it's commoditized at this point.
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
what would be some steps you'd recommend that I take to leverage some of these tools as I'm thinking about my product portfolio as enhancements, new products, or additional markets?
Hmm. Yeah, this is the $1 million question. I've actually started writing call it a book, an AI model, whatever you want to call it these days, called Strategy in the Age of AI, because the question you
Mm,
just asked is what keeps me up at night. How do you win regardless of what competitors do, is my definition of strategy. And everything you asked about, which is where's the product for growth? Name one. You, I can't name one other than Facebook and Google Ads. That's the only product for growth, and they give you look-alike customers. That's it. Here's all your customers. Here's the ones we think look exactly like those. Go advertise to them.
mm,
We believe you'll have a higher conversion
goodness.
rate. We're going to charge you more for it. And, but it's up to you. Good luck. Like, develop your creative, get them to your landing page, close them, get them on the phone, whatever you need to do. But it's up to you. Thank you for the money. We've just given you picks and shovels. I just go back to base principles, and I don't think anything really changes. It's just the speed of iteration changes because everyone ultimately, you can put this product out there, but why are they going to buy? And it ultimately comes down to like, are you delivering outsized value to the marketplace in a differentiated way? So if you have like the four quadrant, it's like, is it different and is it better? And then does your thing meet that need? And so I think, one strategy is we're a conglomerate, right? We can manage all of your stuff and do all your things, Berkshire Hathaway, or we're incredibly, incredibly niche. So this is where you see like a lot of the vertical SaaS companies
Hmm.
focused on real estate or payments, right? Or like Uber will deliver you from A to B or your food from A to B. And so I think it just goes back to core human needs. And one of the things I look at when I do this stuff, Kristen, is I look at the diffusion of products. So, like, the old bell curve, like, here's our innovators, early adopters, laggards, all that sort of thing. If you work backwards, the one with 100% adoption across the human race is oxygen, food, water, transportation, healthcare. Then we start getting a little bit further away. We're into electricity, we're into SMS. SMS is, aside from the internet, is the most adopted technology, which is why ChatGPT worked, because everyone in the world is used to that interface. And we just enabled more functionality in that text box. And then from there, like you go electricity, internet, SMS, and then you go to Facebook, which is kind of wild because they're at like 3 billion
Wow.
people and there's only 8 billion people on the planet. If you go all the way to the left, people think Tesla, it's like all the way on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So it's like, what product? So from that lens, are you delivering food, knowledge, resources? What are you delivering? I think really what your business is delivering is it's kind of like wake up to money, which is like, here's offers for you to on one side of the marketplace for you to earn money. On the other side of the marketplace, it's here's an ROI investment for you, and we believe that this resource here will give you a steeper ROI line or a quicker return on investment than this other person or random person out on the street. So, like, how do you find the person at the moment in need? No one has actually figured out that product other than the internet, which is the world's largest marketplace. And so I think marketplaces like what you all are building is part of that. a way to capture all of this
Hmm.
energy and pent up demand such that if there's a need at the moment of need, it clicks
Right.
in my mind, this brand, I go there and I can search or I can have someone help me find it. The question then is like, how do I keep the brand name in the buyer's mind at the moment in need? It's like car commercials. They can't do it, so they just always run car commercials. It's dangerous because Nissan was going bankrupt and now they're
Yep.
gonna like
Yep.
do a merger with Honda. So it's not easy. This stuff is the hardest thing on the planet.
Hence why marketers are invaluable for that. I want to go back just a little bit. It keeps popping into my head that as you're going into companies and evaluating, is this a good investment? Are we getting the product right? They've got a great leadership team. They've got a great culture. They've got a
Mhm.
good solid customer base, but is the product right? What are some, maybe one or one, two, three things that you love seeing? You
Mhm.
absolutely, that just lights you up and says they've got they've got the trifecta. This is going to be a
Mhm.
good investment.
Yep. I've done 30, 40 of these over the last 3 years, and I'll tell you what I haven't seen in a single one of them is the process that we do in order to analyze this. I haven't seen, here's a single deck built by the product growth team, product growth strategy team. And we interviewed experts, we interviewed our customers, we interviewed our prospects from a sales perspective. We looked at our competitors and did a feature comparison and analysis.
Hmm.
And then we developed our strategy. We looked at our roadmap, and then we built a financial model, and then we validated it with customers. And then we determined this product at this price and this packaging with this messaging and this go to market. I've never seen it, not once. If someone showed me that deck, I'd be like 100% A plus score. I'd get into the discovery discussion with management, and all they'd have to do is upload that deck to the data room, and that would take over product strategy growth.
Hmm.
And I would just read through it, and I'd go, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
Coming from the HR
mm-hmm,
world, you just described a 360 review that
mm-hmm.
was
Yeah,
done popular for so many years.
yeah. And the reason that it doesn't exist, because I've been in these seats, is because it takes so much just to keep the
Yeah.
engine running. And so, like, you got to just keep the hamster wheel turning in some ways. Like, product development is a shark that just continues to eat over and over, and you got to keep
Mhm.
feeding them requirements. So, to take the time, you almost need a dedicated resource or an external pair of hands to do that work for you, especially as part of sell side prep, which is really good. Like, the investment bankers should be doing a lot of sell side prep, having them go through this analysis, publish this in the data room, and I think it would increase the valuation of a lot of these targets. Because I think in a lot of cases, the management team is solid and they have a good understanding of this. It just isn't documented. So we have to pull some of this out. Show me product analytics, show me your strategy, show me your roadmap, show me how it's linked to like growth and the financial statements. And so we have to do a lot of this analysis on their behalf. And so what ends up happening is, we're probably 80, 90% right, but we've got maybe 2 weeks to a month to do this analysis, and there's always going to be detail gaps. But, I think there's a lot of opportunity there and give these folks credit. Like it's very difficult to run a perfect product development team. Like it just doesn't exist. I mean,
And in most cases, there's no product development team. There's not even a product development person. In a lot of cases, that's still the owner, the individual who originally started it. What, given all of that, what one piece of advice would you give to a company that's looking to um, increase their value, whether it's the value for the owner, value for legacy, or value for
mhm,
a new owner at some
mhm.
point when it comes to product management? I think you've
Yeah.
done a really good job of describing and illuminating all the facets of project management.
Hmm.
What would be something I should turn around? I know that leadership teams love this. They listen to a podcast, they walk into a speaker, and they walk out and turn around and walk into their company the next day. Someone were to
Hmm.
do that, where would you tell them to zero in on?
I mean, the value on an exit perspective is all EBITDA. It's the multiple and it's the dollar value. So the dollar value is what's our cost basis? How efficient are we? Are we totally overweighted in R&D or are we underweighted? So I see a lot of financial statements, and I'll tell you, we benchmark between 15 and 25% is pretty good in terms of R&D expense as a percent of revenue.
Mm.
Recently, I've seen a lot at the 30% mark, but I've also seen some up in the 50, 60%. And that's just inefficient. Like a $50 million company with 20 or 30 product people is way too much. So I think you got to level set just in terms of benchmark and reduce some of that spend such that every dollar you're putting into R&D, you can see that returned in the market. And sales and marketing is taking that and driving that out into the market and getting good return and close win ratios. And so it's ARR growth, what percentage? 10 to 30% is pretty good. Retention, 90 to 110%, depending if you're talking gross or net. And then EBITDA margins, 10 to 30%. And then are you in a big enough market where the multiple for your EBITDA margin could continue to expand? Then the last thing is, are you a known brand? Are you the category king in your space? Because that known brand, to our conversation earlier, when someone has a need and they think about it, are you the company immediately, are you the chat GPT of your industry, essentially, right? And that honestly, those are like the four things that get you in the ball game and will get you an exit. So everything else, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's a bit moot, are just levers in order to make that happen. Culture, hiring, firing strategy, right? Like, are you a written driven culture, right? Where everything's documented, you move much faster. Like, what's the size of your customer success and support team? So think ultimately it's ARR growth, retention, EBITDA margins, known brand. That's where a lot of value is.
And there's the next book.
Yeah.
As you're writing there, I thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate all your insights, and it's always interesting to listen to this, whether it be 6 months from now or 18 months from now, and look back and go, wow, before that's a trend center. That's a thought leader that happened. Or possibly we'll look back and go, woo, we were out there. This is
Yes.
what
Yep.
we either predicted it or it went a completely opposite way. But I think there's absolutely some great solid advice. Whether we are growing our business for an outside owner, inside owner, or just the legacy that we want to pass on is keeping that in
Hmm.
mind. And you said something that was so incredibly key. I want to point out is if I make that investment, do I know what I'm going to get back from it?
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
predictability is for every dollar I spend, not am I going to get back 50 cents? Am I going to get back $1.25 or
Hmm.
$2 for it? And
Hmm.
being able to predict that and doing it intentionally with that 360 review and having the information there. I think you gave
Hmm.
us a lot of tips and tools to be able to start to formulate that within our own businesses.
Well, thank you for having me today. I mean, it's a pleasure talking to you as always. And yeah, this is fun.
I look forward until next time. Thank you, Sean.
Great. All right, Kristen, we'll talk to you later.